As Tim Lozier writes in his article, Productivity Hacking in Quality Management, when it comes to quality management, it's not just about the requirements. As companies register to ISO 9001:2015, we see an additional shift. Not only are management system requirements changing to build an improved framework for the standard, but we are also seeing an emphasis on an overall mindset that prioritizes quality. And by overall, we mean encompassing the entire organization. How can we work together as a team to promote a company-wide commitment to quality in a centralized and common way? Well, here to discuss that with us and more is Tim Lozier, Director of Product Strategy at TrackPath. Hi, Tim.
Hey guys, how are you?
Pretty good. So in your article, you say that there are conditions and barriers that prevent organizations from shifting to a full culture of quality. That, based on a survey you recently did, quality management is a priority hindered by cost and complexity. Can you give us a bit more detail about what your survey found?
Yeah, sure. So we did this survey and we asked a lot of questions, but one of the main areas that we focused on was what are the challenges that people are facing, what processes are most important to them, and what values they're going to get from them. And you're right to say that, but you know the thing about it is you have these barriers. There are certain things that just get in the way to getting the value you want. And one of those was cost. I mean, it was budget. It was the ability to invest that financial leap to get into what you want to do. Some of the other ones that we saw were also around, the user adoption. So user adoption was one of them. How are we going to get those users to get into it? And then one other one that was interesting was the complexity, what I'll call the complexity of implementation, which really I take to look at more, how much time is this going to take me to do? So when you start thinking about the values and the challenges and how you're going to get to that value, the barriers of time, money, and adoption really become powerful obstacles to get through. And part of what we've been talking about is how to get around those barriers to get what you need.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that, Tim, because that was going to be kind of our next question is looking at organizations looking at simple and affordable solutions that lets them carry out those critical processes and promote visibility and tracking. But to get there, you might need to kind of hack around a little bit or work around the roadblocks in your organization. So by hack, quote unquote, do you mean short-term workarounds while you're trying to fix your system? Maybe you can explain that a little bit.
Yeah, sure. So, it's funny, you think of hacking, and when you start to put that term, it has a kind of a negative connotation. You start thinking of things like WikiLeaks or Hillary Clinton's emails or things that are bad for people. And but what's interesting is in recent years, the term hack has almost had a positive note. You think of people who talk about their life hacks and things they can get around. And really, all the purpose of hacking in general is to to understand the situation you're in, look at the barriers that are keeping you from getting to where you want to be, and see what kind of ways you can go around it. And so when you start looking at productivity hacking, you want to say, what's our current situation? What is the challenge I'm facing? And what's the value I want to get to? And how can I get around those barriers? Using some creative thinking, some creative methods, or thinking outside of the box. And you kind of have to get a little scrappy, but the idea is that you can go and find ways to get the value you need without having to necessarily jump through those barriers and get caught up in that. And that's really what the crux of what we're going to be talking about this Tuesday is, what are the simple, easy methods that you can kind of use and think about to kind of get yourself around some of those areas to really get to productivity.
And you mentioned earlier complexity, and in your article you make a statement, or one question that you pose in your article is, are we making this too hard? From what you've heard and experienced in the field, are people making their QMS too hard to follow or maintain? And if so, what can they do about it?
Yeah, so one of the things that we started to look at is that people are really good at defining their processes and building their requirements around a framework, whether it's ISO internally or a regulatory framework. But where things start to get a little bit muddy is when you start thinking, how do I get, what tools and what systems and what methods do I use to get from point A, the problem, to point B, the solution? And we found that a lot of people are using a lot of different methods and consuming a lot of data in between those points, whether it's email, spreadsheets, chats, talks, whatever it is. We actually pulled a study that says, humans consume about 34 gigabytes of data a day in their lives. And so the challenge becomes is that when you start building the story of quality from the point in which I detect an event to the point at which I correct an event, how many different things am I doing that aren't centralized, that are all over the place, that I'm trying to figure out? Like, how many emails do I have to go through to pick out where the crux of my issues are? And so are we making it too hard? Are we putting too much chaos into the system? And so one of the things that we're going to talk about is around the idea of centralizing, the idea of keeping it all in one place and having that traceability, have that visibility, so that way you don't have to ask, where is this all coming from? It's all coming from one place, and we can kind of hack our way around the barriers of communication to really get that full story in one place, in one conversation, and adopt a culture of enrollment towards really getting from point A to point B when it comes to quality and compliance.
Well, that's a nice setup. So you've mentioned a couple times we do have a webinar coming up next Tuesday, productivity hacking in quality management. Simple ways to get more visibility and control in your processes. As you mentioned, that is next Tuesday, January 31st at 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific. I'm going to be there just to be the host, and Tim Lozier there is going to be the guy with all the brains telling us how to productivity hack. Tim Lozier, Director of Product Strategy at TrackPath. Thanks for being with us this morning.
Yeah, thanks guys. It's been fun.
Okay, see you on Tuesday.
Thanks.
All right.
See you Tuesday.
All right.